Let's get to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time. And take a listen to this answer.
Say, hey, when there's a problem, you call a man. The Democrats can't even tell you what a man is.
So when you hear Walz brag about how much of a man he is, what does that tell you?
I think there might be a little bit of a cope there, you could say. There's a little bit, he has to remind us how masculine he is, trying to not even be able to load a shotgun or fix a truck.
Tim Walz assumed he could coast by with soft speeches and photo opportunities, but Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk brought out the political sledgehammers. In a ruthless takedown, they exposed every weakness in his leadership, from failing schools to rising crime and hollow policies disguised as progress. It wasn't mere criticism, it was a demolition. They pulled back the curtain on a governor more obsessed with headlines than actual results. The show is over and the truth has claimed center stage.
Said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools.
I'll tell you one thing, the most masculine thing that someone can do in America today is stand up for women that are not able to stand up for themselves.
Right.
So while Tim Walz is going on Gavin Newsom's podcast, attacking me, by the way, saying that I'm a bad guy, well, I'm sorry, Governor Walz. One thing that we don't have in common is, unlike you in Minnesota, I, every single day, am actually fighting for female privacy in locker rooms and that women's sports will not have men in them. Real men stand up for women when they're not able to stand up.
Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk never wait for permission. They don't check whether the stage is clear. When they see nonsense masquerading as leadership, they don't whisper in back rooms, they blast it, open with cameras rolling and facts flying. And when it came to Governor Tim Walz, they arrived with enough firepower to burn down his entire narrative. It wasn't personal grudges driving them, but sheer frustration that such loud incompetence practically begged for a microphone.
The idea that you said that you were in war.
Yeah.
Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This is a sacred trust. In the spring of 2005, Walz walked away from that sacred trust, abandoning his post when he learned of an upcoming Iraq deployment. This is cynical Pubula saying this. He is a coward. According to this Twitter feed, he is a quitter. And every veteran I've talked to thinks that Walz is close to betraying the country by doing it.
Megyn Kelly took one look at the slick political packaging around Walz and sensed something was wrong. He wore the everyman label like a costume, pretending to be a folksy governor who cared about regular Minnesotans. But Megyn, having spent years shredding phonies and fake narratives, recognized what she was seeing. Walz's act didn't scream authenticity, it screamed consultant-crafted nonsense wrapped in secondhand sincerity.
What Walz did is the moral equivalent of a mother dropping off her 5 preteen children at an orphanage in the dead of night so that she could run for Congress. Yes, it is that bad. This was more than just abandoning troops. It also reflects a major personal deficit in his character and makeup. By the way, this is written by a veteran.
She started peeling back the shiny veneer, exposing the gap between his promises and his performance. Here was a man who campaigned on unity and transparency, but governed with confusion and cowardice. Megyn honed in on how Walz constantly shifted. Blame like a kid who spilled milk and swore the cup was at fault. His entire leadership style could be summed up in 3 steps: announce, a vague plan dodged responsibility and hold a press conference that answered nothing. Charlie Kirk, meanwhile, went for the economic jugular, torching Walz's fiscal ideas as if they were written on flash paper. Charlie ridiculed how the governor could chase businesses out of Minnesota faster than a winter blizzard clears the roads. Taxes soared, regulations ran wild, and economic growth stagnated like a swamp in July. Charlie pointed out that Walz seemed to think prosperity meant growing government payrolls while punishing the private sector for daring to succeed. Together, they built the bigger picture. Megyn tore apart the pandemic mismanagement, describing how Walz acted like a part-time epidemiologist with a full-time fear machine. Lockdowns hit hard, applied selectively depending on politics, crushing small businesses while giant corporations coasted by. Schools were shut down while bars got capacity waivers. This wasn't science, she argued. It was politics dressed up in a lab coat.
The idea that you said that you were in war.
Yeah.
Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar's not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on...
Charlie piled on with receipts showing how Walz flaunted data one week and buried it the next, depending on which way the public mood shifted. Hospital capacity numbers were overblown, projections missed the mark, and policies were designed to soothe headlines instead of protecting people. Charlie called it panic management, masquerading as governance. Instead of preparing Minnesotans, Walz scared them, and when leadership was needed, he froze like a deer in the political headlights. It wasn't just the policies, it was the theater too. Megyn pointed out how Walz always managed to appear at photo ops, whether it was protests, vaccinations, or crises, looking like a character in a documentary titled The Burden of Leadership. Yet when the consequences landed, cities burning, kids falling behind small businesses disappearing, Walz vanished like a ghost with a PR team. Charlie didn't let the riots slide either, pulling receipts on how Walz handled the George Floyd protests turned riots. Cities fell into chaos, police were overwhelmed, and Walz waited until the damage was irreversible before sending in the National Guard.
Tim Walz then lied about it to run for Congress and acted as if he was on the front lines. And people in Walz's battalion died. People under his supervision died. If Master Sergeant retired Walz could not be trusted to fulfill his duties he had to his soldiers, his unit, and his nation in 2005, how can he be trusted to be vice president in 2025?
Charlie mocked the idea that Walz was waiting for more information, saying it looked more like he was waiting for someone else to fix the mess so he could claim credit afterward. The hesitation, the stalling, the let it burn approach all revealed a man more worried about political fallout than real flames. Then they tackled education. Megyn attacked Walz's school record with precision, showing how, despite being a former teacher, he oversaw some of the worst declines in Minnesota's education in years. Reading scores fell, math scores cratered, and instead of making real changes, Walz offered more virtual learning and fewer solutions. They both then turned to the culture fights. Megyn argued that Walz tried to play every side of every issue, ending up as the political equivalent of lukewarm soup, never leading with conviction, only calculation, and pleasing almost no one. She called him out for enabling radical agendas while acting like the adult in the room, arguing that his brand of moderation was just hiding extremism behind a Minnesota accent.
What kind of bullshit is that? No, you don't, sir. We don't lie about military service we didn't actually perform, like going to war. We don't steal valor by saying that we had a higher rank in the National Guard than we did. We don't run around saying we served in operating Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan when we didn't. We don't stand and watch somebody say that we were in combat in Iraq when we weren't.
Charlie followed with jabs at Walz's loyalty to the political machine. He said Walz didn't lead Minnesota, but took orders from donors' party talking points and whatever the latest progressive trend demanded. When they told him to mask kids, he complied. When they told him to close churches but leave liquor stores open, he obeyed. When they told him to pretend crime was imaginary, he nodded like a bobblehead in a hurricane. Charlie's point was clear: Walz wasn't governing, he was managing the Democratic brand in snow boots. And they didn't stop. Megyn shifted to public safety, highlighting how under Walz's leadership law enforcement had been demoralized, defunded, and demonized. Morale was in the gutter, crime was up, and residents were left wondering why their leaders acted like public safety was a dirty word. Charlie connected the dots with stats on officer resignations and first-hand accounts showing how softened crime policies created harsh realities for the communities Walz claimed to care about. He argued that Walz didn't just fail to stop the chaos, he helped create the illusion that let it happen. Together, their takedown wasn't just a hit job, it was a comprehensive, precise, and devastating analysis of leadership, economy, education, public safety, and culture. They didn't even have to shout to make it sting, it was surgical, not emotional, and all the more lethal for it.
Attacking me, by the way, saying that I'm a bad guy. Well, I'm sorry, Governor Walz. One thing that we don't have in common is, unlike you in Minnesota, I, every single day, am actually fighting for female privacy in locker rooms and that women's sports will not have men in them. Real men.
They dismantled the talking points, stripped away the excuses, and mocked the half-baked narratives. What remained was a picture of a man who talked big, acted small, and governed as if he was always waiting for someone else to move first. And it wasn't over. Megyn promised to keep the spotlight on leaders who fail the people they claim to serve. Charlie vowed to keep exposing the numbers, the contradictions, and the political gymnastics pretending to be governance. Because the truth was, Tim Walz might keep smiling through his press conferences, but the curtain had been pulled back. Megyn and Charlie kept pushing next, turning to Walz's climate agenda, a neatly packaged bit of political theater that looked good on paper but collapsed in practice. Megyn showed how Walz talked about green energy like he was auditioning for a solar panel commercial, while back home roads crumbled and people froze in winter thanks to poor planning and failing energy grids. It was all style and no substance, shiny headlines with nothing behind them.
All from that clarification. And then here's two pieces of this that are really, I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak like we do. I speak like regular people.
Charlie then drilled into the budget, breaking it down like a frustrated math teacher. The numbers didn't lie. Minnesota collected plenty of taxpayer money, but was somehow always broke when it came to solving real problems. Charlie called it reverse alchemy, turning gold into potholes. He mocked the state's obsession with raising taxes in the name of progress, while actual progress was nowhere to be seen outside of campaign flyers. Megyn shifted the focus to healthcare, another supposed Walz priority where reforms turned into bureaucratic sludge. Wait times grew, rural hospitals suffered, and the only thing that expanded was the number of committees trying to fix it.
Fallout continues for Tim Walz on the disastrous performance he delivered, in particular when it comes to his self-described knuckle-headed behavior, which was just his latest in a series of lies. The reason he resorted to, I'm a knucklehead, was he got confronted with his latest lie that's been unearthed. There's a long list of them. This one was that he was in China when the Tiananmen Square disaster unfolded, when hundreds of people were killed. You know, whether you were in a place where hundreds of people are being massacred by their government.
Megyn described it as the only healthcare plan in America that made people sicker just by watching it happen. Doctors were frustrated, patients were left waiting, and the whole system looked like a hamster wheel instead of a functioning network. Charlie went after immigration policy, pointing out Walz's mushy, vague positions. Sanctuary city gestures, open-door promises, and symbolic declarations ignored the actual strain on communities with already limited resources. Charlie noted the gap between what politicians in St. Paul wanted and what everyday Minnesotans actually experienced, a gap growing wider while Walz built a bridge of promises that led nowhere.
If it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This took chutzpah. Let's go through it. You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record. He keeps doing this. Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't, actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel.
Then they took apart Walz's media strategy. Megyn ripped it to shreds, the carefully managed interviews, the puff pieces. The refusal to face tough questions unless the cameras were friendly and the scripts pre-approved. She'd seen politicians hide behind PR walls before, but Walz had made it an art form. She joked that his idea of transparency was letting reporters watch him read a statement written by 6 strangers. Charlie agreed, adding that Walz treated media appearances like group projects in college, showing up at the end, reading the last paragraph, then expecting full credit while the damage piled up. Behind the scenes, teachers burned out, business owners gave up.
Disgusting, repulsive, and reprehensible examples of abandoning one's unit, of turning back on country and instead for own personal comfort and safety that we have ever seen in politics. And it's far worse than I even think people are describing it. It's worse than stolen valor. It is abandoning your fellow soldier.
Parents pulled their kids out of public schools, and what did Walz do? He held a roundtable with like-minded allies and called it progress. Megyn closed by hammering the culture of complacency under Walz, where mediocrity became policy failure, was reframed as transition, and every disaster was followed by a polished press release blaming the system instead of the leadership. She made it clear this was bigger than partisan politics. It was about a governor who failed to show up when Minnesotans needed him most. Charlie agreed, reminding everyone that in the end, this wasn't about red versus blue, but about results. Under Tim Walz, results had been replaced by excuses, optimism swapped for spin, and leadership buried under layers of scripted empathy and hollow applause.